Rainy nights have a way of playing tricks on us. The steady rhythm of rain on the windows, the dim glow of streetlights reflecting off wet pavement. It can be comforting, but it can also hide something much darker. In the rain, shadows stretch longer, noises sound sharper, and what you can't see becomes far more terrifying than what you can. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 real and chilling stories that all take place on rainy nights. Stories of strange encounters, dangerous strangers, and moments that will send a chill down your spine. So grab a blanket, turn the lights down, and let the sound of the rain draw you into the darkness. Let's begin. Story 1. The car behind me. It was one of those nights when everything seemed to go wrong. Eric, a 32-year-old retail manager, had just finished an exhausting double shift at work. It was a little after 2 a.m. when he finally clocked out and started his long drive home. The rain had been coming down in sheets all night, making the roads slick and visibility nearly non-existent. The glowing orange of the gas station sign was the last bit of civilization he passed before the road stretched into the darkness ahead. Eric knew this route well. It was the fastest way back to his quiet suburban neighborhood. But tonight, the drive felt different. The windshield wipers worked overtime, squeaking across the glass as they struggled to keep up with the downpour. Streetlights flickered weakly, their beams barely cutting through the rain. "I just need to get home," Eric muttered to himself, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The night felt heavier than usual, as though the storm wasn't the only thing weighing down the air. The green light. As Eric approached an intersection, he noticed something strange. There was a car stopped in the middle of the road, directly under the traffic light. The light was green, but the car wasn't moving. "Come on, buddy. What are you doing?" Eric muttered. He slowed his car, peering through the rain to get a better look. The vehicle was an old sedan, its dull paint glinting faintly under the traffic light. The windows were fogged up, and its hazard lights weren't on. It was just sitting there. Eric waited, unsure if the driver was asleep, had car trouble, or was just distracted. He honked lightly. No reaction. The rain intensified, pounding on the roof of his car like a warning. Feeling uneasy, Eric decided to go around. As he carefully steered into the opposite lane to pass, he glanced into the other car. The interior was dim, and he couldn't make out the driver's face, but he felt a pair of eyes on him. A shiver ran down his spine as he continued down the road. The car follows. Not long after passing the sedan, Eric noticed headlights in his rearview mirror. At first, he thought it was just another driver heading in the same direction. But as he continued onto smaller, less traveled streets, the car stayed behind him, matching his every turn. Eric tried to rationalize it. "It's probably just a coincidence," he told himself, but his knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. The other car crept closer. Its headlights filled his mirrors, glaring and intrusive. Eric's pulse quickened. He tested his theory by turning onto a side street. The car followed. He made another turn. It followed again. "Okay, this is not normal," he whispered. The car was tailgating him now, its engine roaring louder as it closed the gap. Eric's heart pounded in his chest. He thought about calling the police, but realized his phone was buried in his bag on the passenger seat. Then, his dashboard lit up with a warning. Tire pressure low. The flat tire. "No, no, no. Not now," Eric groaned. He eased off the gas, trying to assess the situation. The steering felt sluggish, and he could hear the faint thump-thump-thump of a flat tire. The car behind him honked, the sound harsh and aggressive. It flashed its high beams, flooding Eric's car with light. Panic set in. He couldn't keep driving with a flat, but stopping felt even more dangerous. He was on a deserted stretch of road with no houses or businesses in sight, just trees lining either side of the wet asphalt. Reluctantly, Eric pulled over to the shoulder. The car behind him slowed, its headlights still blinding. "Just keep going," Eric muttered under his breath, hoping the other driver would pass. But they didn't. Instead, the car stopped a few yards behind him. The men. Eric's stomach dropped as he watched the driver's door open. A man stepped out, followed by 2 others from the passenger side. They were wearing dark jackets with hoods pulled up against the rain. Eric's mind raced. What do they want? Help? Or... He couldn't finish the thought. One of the men walked toward Eric's car, his hands stuffed into his pockets. The other two hung back, their faces obscured by the hoods. Eric quickly locked his doors and rolled his window up, leaving just a crack to speak through. "Hey, man, you need help with that tire?" the first man asked. His voice was calm but carried an edge that made Eric's skin crawl. "I'm good, thanks," Eric replied, trying to sound confident. The man chuckled and took a step closer. "Come on, don't be like that. It's pouring out here. Let us give you a hand." "I said I'm fine," Eric repeated, his voice firmer this time. The man's expression darkened. He leaned closer to the window, his breath fogging the glass. "Unlock the door." Eric's heart raced. He reached for his phone, fumbling to unlock it, but before he could dial, the man slammed his palm against the driver's side window, making Eric jump. "Open the door, now," the man shouted. The other two men began circling the car, their dark figures barely visible through the rain. The attack. One of them picked up a rock from the side of the road and hurled it at the windshield, cracking the glass. Another man banged on the passenger side door, shouting for Eric to get out. Eric panicked. He threw the car into drive, the damaged tire screeching against the pavement as he tried to pull away. But the flat made it nearly impossible to gain speed. Before he could get far, one of the men smashed the driver's side window with a crowbar. Shards of glass rained down as the man reached in, unlocking the door. Eric fought back, kicking and shoving as they dragged him out into the rain. One of them pressed a gun to his temple. "Wallet. Phone. Now," the man growled. Eric didn't resist. He handed over everything, shaking from adrenaline and fear. After rummaging through his car for anything valuable, the men jumped back into their own vehicle and sped off, leaving Eric battered and soaked on the roadside. The aftermath. When the police arrived, Eric recounted the entire ordeal. The officers found no sign of the men or their car, just the shattered glass and the debris they'd left behind. One officer suggested that the flat tire wasn't an accident. The area had seen similar attacks recently, with criminals scattering nails or spikes at intersections to target unsuspecting drivers. The thought made Eric's blood run cold. For weeks after the incident, Eric couldn't drive at night without glancing nervously at his mirrors. He installed a dashcam, started carrying pepper spray, and avoided lonely roads whenever possible. But no matter how much time passed, the memory of those headlights closing in through the rain haunted him. Eric's story is a chilling reminder of how quickly a normal night can take a terrifying turn. Sometimes, it's not the rain or the darkness you need to fear. It's what's hiding in them. Story 2. The Man at the Window. Sam had always loved rainy nights. There was something calming about the sound of water hitting the roof, the cool breeze drifting through slightly cracked windows. It was a ritual for him to sit with a cup of tea and a good book, letting the storm outside lull him into a rare sense of peace. But on this particular night, peace was the last thing he'd feel. It was early November, and the rain had started in the late afternoon, growing heavier as the hours ticked by. Sam's house was tucked away in a quiet suburban neighborhood, surrounded by tall oaks and maples. It was the kind of place where you rarely locked your doors, where strangers were a curiosity, not a threat. Sam's dog, Bear, a sturdy German shepherd, loved to roam the backyard no matter the weather. As Sam cooked dinner that evening, he noticed Bear pacing near the sliding glass door, occasionally letting out low, impatient barks. All right, I'm coming," Sam muttered, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He opened the door, letting Bear bound out into the rain. "Don't stay out too long," Sam called after him, though he knew Bear never listened. Bear's strange behavior. Sam returned to his cooking, the warm sense of garlic and spices filling the kitchen. He was halfway through chopping vegetables when he heard it, a sharp, high-pitched yelp from outside. His heart skipped. Bear was tough and rarely startled. Sam dropped the knife and rushed to the door, peering out into the rain-soaked darkness. "Bear," he called, his voice tinged with worry. At first, there was nothing, just the sound of rain splashing against the patio. Then, out of the shadows, Bear came bolting toward the door. His fur was soaked, his ears flat against his head, and his tail tucked firmly between his legs. "What's wrong, boy?" Sam asked, opening the door to let him in. Bear darted past him, heading straight for the living room, where he crouched low, growling softly. Sam's brow furrowed. He'd never seen Bear like this before. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the patio, scanning the backyard. The beam cut through the rain, illuminating the fence, the trees, the shed, but nothing seemed out of place. He was about to go back inside when something caught his eye. A figure. The man at the window. At first, Sam thought it was a trick of the rain, but as he squinted, he realized there was a man standing just beyond the fence, partially obscured by the shadows of the trees. The man wasn't moving. He was just standing there, his face turned toward the house, watching. Sam felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice carrying over the rain. The man didn't respond. He didn't flinch or step back. He simply stood there, motionless, as if he belonged to the night itself. Sam's grip on the flashlight tightened. "You need to leave. This is private property." The man tilted his head slightly, as if considering Sam's words. Then, without a sound, he turned and disappeared into the darkness. Sam stood there for a moment, rain dripping down his face, his pulse racing. Locking down. Back inside, Sam locked every door and window, something he rarely bothered to do. Bear hadn't moved from his spot in the living room, his eyes fixed on the sliding glass door. "It's okay, buddy," Sam said, though his voice was shaky. "He's gone." But Bear's growl deepened. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, though Sam couldn't shake the image of the man standing in the rain, his face obscured, his intentions unreadable. By the time Sam went to bed, the storm had worsened. Wind howled through the trees, and thunder rumbled so loudly it rattled the windows. Bear slept at the foot of the bed, his ears twitching at every sound. The creak of the floorboards. Sam wasn't sure what woke him. It wasn't the thunder. He'd grown used to that over the years. No, it was something subtler. A creak. His eyes snapped open, and he lay there, listening. Another creak, this one louder. It came from downstairs. Probably just the house settling, he muttered, though he didn't believe it. Bear let out a low whine. His ears perked and his gaze fixed on the bedroom door. Sam grabbed his phone and turned on the flashlight. The bright beam cut through the darkness as he crept down the stairs, his heart hammering in his chest. The living room was empty. So was the kitchen. But as he moved closer to the sliding glass door, he froze. The lock was undone. Inside the house, Sam's stomach twisted. He was certain he'd locked it earlier. He double-checked every lock after seeing the man outside. Before he could process what this meant, a voice broke the silence. "Hey, we just want to talk." Sam spun around, the flashlight shaking in his hand. The voice was coming from the hallway that led to the front door. He couldn't see anyone, but he could feel their presence. The hair on the back of his neck stood on end. "Get out of my house," Sam shouted, his voice cracking. Bear was beside him now, barking furiously. The voice came again, softer this time. "No need to get worked up. Just come out here." Sam didn't move. He dialed 911, his fingers trembling as he whispered his address to the operator. "They're inside," he said, his voice barely audible. The standoff. The next few minutes felt like hours. Sam backed into the kitchen, holding a knife in one hand and his phone in the other. Bear stood at his side, his growls deep and menacing. The intruders didn't come closer, but they didn't leave either. One of them laughed, a low, unsettling chuckle that echoed through the house. "Cops are on their way," Sam shouted, hoping it would scare them off. It worked. He heard hurried footsteps, the sound of a door slamming, and then silence. When the police arrived minutes later, they found no one inside. But they did find muddy footprints leading from the unlocked sliding glass door to the front hallway. The aftermath. Sam never felt safe in that house again. For weeks, he jumped at every sound, every creak of the floorboards. Bear stayed close to him at all times, his once carefree demeanor replaced by a wary vigilance. Eventually, Sam decided to move. The house was too full of bad memories, and the idea that someone had been watching him, planning their intrusion, was too much to bear. To this day, he can't hear the sound of rain without feeling a chill. It reminds him of that night, of the man at the window and the whispers in the dark. Sam's story is a terrifying reminder that even the safest places can be invaded. It's not just the storm outside we have to fear. It's the dangers it might be hiding. Story 3. The Robbery in the Rain. Lisa had grown accustomed to the monotony of working graveyard shifts. The convenience store where she worked sat on the outskirts of town, a lonely outpost on a desolate stretch of highway. Most nights, the only company she had was the rhythmic hum of the refrigerators and the occasional customer seeking gas, snacks, or cigarettes. But this night wasn't like the others. The rain had started in the early evening, a light drizzle that gradually grew into a relentless downpour. By the time her shift started at 11 p.m., the parking lot was empty, the highway beyond it deserted. Even the usual hum of passing trucks seemed to have been swallowed by the storm. Lisa leaned on the counter, flipping through a magazine to pass the time. The store's clock ticked loudly in the silence, marking each passing minute. She had no idea that the events of the next few hours would haunt her for years to come. The first sighting. It was just after 3 a.m. when Lisa noticed it, a car pulling into the parking lot. The headlights cut through the rain, creating long, distorted shadows on the wet asphalt. At first, Lisa thought nothing of it. Customers often parked out front to shelter from the rain or make late-night phone calls. But as the minutes ticked by, no one got out. The car just sat there, its engine idling softly. Lisa felt a twinge of unease. She tried to brush it off, telling herself that whoever was in the car probably just needed a break from driving in the storm. But as the car lingered, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She stood up from the counter, pretending to straighten the candy displays, her eyes flicking to the car every few seconds. The rain made it hard to see clearly, but she thought she caught a glimpse of movement inside, a shadow shifting in the driver's seat. Still, no one came inside. A quiet neighbor. After what felt like an eternity, the car finally reversed out of the lot and disappeared into the storm. Lisa exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. But her relief was short-lived. Through the rain-streaked glass, she noticed something unusual across the street. A small pharmacy sat on the opposite corner, its neon sign glowing faintly through the downpour. Normally, it was closed at this hour, its lights off and the parking lot empty. Tonight, however, there was a figure moving inside. Lisa squinted, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The interior lights flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows on the walls. A person, tall and dressed in dark clothing, was moving behind the counter. At first, Lisa thought it might be an employee working late, but something about the way they moved felt wrong. They were hurried, frantic, like they were searching for something. Then she saw the shattered glass door. The robbery. Lisa's heart raced. She ducked behind the counter, her mind racing. Should she call the police? What if the robber saw her? Peeking out from behind the counter, she grabbed the store phone and dialed 911. Her hands trembling as she described what she'd seen. "There's someone breaking into the pharmacy across the street," she whispered. "I think they smashed the door. They're still inside." The operator assured her that officers were on their way and told her to stay inside and lock the doors. Lisa hung up and did as instructed, double-checking every lock and flipping the sign on the door to closed. The rain outside grew louder, pounding against the windows like a warning. The return of the car. Minutes later, Lisa heard it, the low rumble of an engine. She froze, peeking through the blinds just in time to see a car pulling into the pharmacy's parking lot. It was the same car from earlier. A chill ran down her spine as she watched the driver get out. They were wearing a hooded jacket, the rain plastering the fabric to their frame. The figure disappeared into the pharmacy, and moments later, the lights inside flickered again. Lisa strained her ears, trying to hear over the storm. She thought she caught the faint sound of voices, too. Maybe 3 people talking in hushed tones. Her pulse quickened. It wasn't just one robber. A growing sense of dread. As the minutes dragged on, Lisa couldn't tear her eyes away from the scene across the street. The figures moved quickly, grabbing items and shoving them into bags. One of them seemed to keep watch near the shattered door, their heads snapping toward every passing car or gust of wind. Lisa felt a pang of helplessness. She'd done the right thing by calling the police, but what if they didn't get there in time? What if the robbers decided to target her store next? She reached for her phone again, dialing 911 for an update. "The officers are on their way, ma'am," the operator assured her. "They're less than 2 minutes out. Stay calm and stay hidden." Lisa hung up, clutching the phone tightly as she ducked behind the counter once more. The arrest. Suddenly, the sound of sirens cut through the storm. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, growing brighter as they approached. Lisa peeked out just in time to see the robbers scatter. One of them bolted through the pharmacy's back door, disappearing into the night. The other two ran for the car, their bags slung over their shoulders. The car screeched out of the parking lot, its tires kicking up water as it sped down the highway. Moments later, 2 police cruisers pulled into the lot. One stayed at the pharmacy, while the other took off after the fleeing car. Lisa pressed her hands to her mouth, her heart pounding as she watched the scene unfold. A close call. About 20 minutes later, an officer came into Lisa's store. He was young, with tired eyes and rain dripping from the brim of his hat. "You're the one who called it in?" he asked. Lisa nodded. "Good work," he said, his tone genuinely appreciative. "We caught the driver and one of the passengers a few miles down the road. The third guy's still out there, but we'll get him." Lisa felt a wave of relief wash over her, but it was quickly replaced by a lingering sense of unease. The robbers had been so close, just a few hundred feet away from her store. If they decided to target her instead of the pharmacy, she might not have been so lucky. The officer stayed for a while, taking her statement and reassuring her that she'd done the right thing. But even after he left, Lisa couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still watching her. The aftermath. For weeks after the robbery, Lisa found herself jumping at shadows. Every time it rained, she felt her nerves fray, as though the storm itself carried the memory of that night. She eventually quit her job at the convenience store, unable to face the isolation and vulnerability of working alone. But the experience stayed with her, a chilling reminder that even the quietest nights can hide the darkest dangers. Lisa's story is a haunting example of how quickly things can spiral out of control, especially on nights when the world feels silent and the rain hides everything. And that brings us to the end of tonight's stories. From eerie encounters on deserted roads to mysterious intruders in the dead of night and a tense standoff at a convenience store, these rainy night tales remind us that fear doesn't always knock. It sometimes slips in quietly with the storm. Rain has a way of distorting the world around us. It blurs our vision, drowns out sounds, and makes the shadows seem darker. And as these stories show, sometimes it's not the storm we should fear, but what or who it's hiding. Have you ever experienced something terrifying on a rainy night? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear your own spine-chilling encounters. And if these tales send a shiver down your spine, don't forget to hit the like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more real-life horror stories. Until next time, stay safe, stay dry, and remember, the rain may wash away the past, but it can never drown out fear.